Do it this way. I'm Lady Rain. This is the Reader's Nook. And we are on to chapter 3 of the third part. And we left off with a side note. So who had the car been hidden from? They had buried the car. Remember? The sister's car. It's from you, guard. They hid it from you. They still don't want you to know what they're capable of when it comes to protecting themselves. They hid it, and Bobbi told you Annie went away. He went back with this dangerous secret turning in his mind, Jewel. That is what we're going to do. And right now, I do have to leave in about an hour. So I'm going to read for at least a half an hour, get through chapter 3, and maybe into chapter 4. And then I have to take my munchkin to work. So then I will continue reading tonight. So we're going to let a little bit in today anyway. It's called The Hatch. Like they've gotten to it, huh? It happened, part 1. It happened 2 days later, as Haven lay sprawled and sunstruck under the August heat. Dog days had come, except, of course, there were no dog days left in Haven, unless, maybe, there was one in Bobbi Anderson's shed. Guard and Bobbi were at the bottom of the cut, which was now 170 feet deep. The hull of the ship, formed one side of this excavation, and the other side, behind the silvery mesh crisscrossing it, showed a cutaway view of thin soil, clay, schist, granite, and spongy aquifer. A geologist would have loved it. They were wearing jeans and sweatshirts. It was stifling hot on the surface, but down here it was chilly. Gardner felt like a bug crawling on the side of a water cooler. On his head, he wore a hard hat with a flashlight attached to it by silver utility tape. Bobbi had cautioned him to use the light as sparingly as possible. Oh, excuse me. Batteries were in limited supply. Both of his ears were stuffed with cotton. He was using a pneumatic drill to shag up big chunks of rock. Bobbi was at the other end of the cut, doing the same thing. Gardner had asked her that morning why they had to drill. I like the radio explosives better, Bobbi, old kid, he said. Less pain and strain on the American brain. Know what I mean? Bobbi didn't smile. Bobbi seemed to be losing her sense of humor along with her hair. Excuse me. We're too close now, Bobbi said. Using an explosive might damage something we don't want to damage. The hatch? The hatch. Gardner's shoulders were aching, and the plate on his head was aching as well. Or in his head was aching as well. It was probably metal. Steel couldn't ache. But it always seemed to when he was down here. And he hoped Bobbi would signal soon that it was time for them to knock off for lunch. He let the drill chatter and bite its way toward the ship again, not bothering too much about grazing that dull silver surface. Good gracious! This is ridiculous. My yawning. You had to be careful not to let the tip of the drill walk onto it hard. He had discovered it was apt to rebound and tear off your foot if you weren't careful. The ship itself was invulnerable to the rough kiss of the drill. Hold on, I almost forgot. Want to make sure if anybody else joins that they know what we're reading. There we go. Good gracious. The ship itself was invulnerable to the rough kiss of the drill, as it had been to the explosive he and his parade of helpers had used. There was at least no danger of damaging the goods. The drill touched the ship's surface, and suddenly its steady machine gun thunder turned to a high-pitched squeal. He thought he saw smoke squirt from the pulsing blur of the drill's tip. There was a snap. Something flew past his head. All this happened in less than a second. He shut the drill off and saw the drill bit was almost entirely gone. Good gracious. All that remained was a jagged stub. Oh, oh, crazy. It's allergy season too, and it's December, and it's like 40 degrees outside. I swear. Like, not cold, cold at all. I wore a sweater outside, like fall out there. The drill touched. Oh. Da, 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 da. All that remained was a jagged stub. Gardner turned around and saw the part that had gone winging past his face embedded in the rock of the cut. It had shred a strand of the meshwork nearly in two. Delayed shock hit, making his knees want to come unlocked and spill him to the ground. Missed me by a horsehair, no more, no less. Mother! He tried to pull it out of the rock, and though at first it wasn't going to come, then he began to wiggle it back and forth, like pulling a tooth out of a gum, he thought, and a hysterical titter escaped him. The chunk of drill bit came free. It was the size of a .45 slug, maybe a little bigger. Suddenly he was on the verge of passing out. He put an arm on the mesh-covered wall of the cut and rested his head on it. He covered his eyes and waited for the world to go either way and come back. He was dimly aware that Bobbi's drill had also cut out. The world began to come back, and Bobbi was shaking him. Guard, what's wrong? There was real concern in her voice. Hearing it made Gardner feel absurdly like weeping. Of course, he was very tired. I almost got shot in the head by a .45 caliber drill bit, Gardner said. On second thought, maybe it was a .357 Magnum. What are you talking about? Gardner handed her the jagged fragment had worked out of the wall. Bobbi looked at it and whistled. Jesus! I think he and I just missed connections. That's the second time I've almost gotten killed down in this shithole. The first was when your friend Enders almost forgot to send down the sling after I'd set one of those radio explosives. He's no friend of mine, Bobbi said absently. Think he's a dork. Guard, what did you hit? What made it happen? What do you mean? A rock. What else is there down here to hit? Were you near the ship? All of a sudden, Bobbi looked excited. No more than that. Nearly feverish. Yes, but I've grazed the ship with the drill before. It just bounced back. But Bobbi wasn't listening anymore. She was at the ship, down on her knees, digging into the rubble with her fingers. It looked like it was steaming. Guard thought It's here, Guard, finally here! He had joined her before he realized that she hadn't spoken the conclusion of her thoughts aloud. Gardner had heard her in his head, too. Something all right, Gardner thought. Pulling aside the rock Gardner's drill had chunked up just before it exploded, Bobbi had revealed finally the line of the ship's surface. One single line in all of that huge, featureless expanse. Looking at it, Gardner understood Bobbi's excitement. He stretched out his hand and touched it. Better not, she said sharply. Remember what happened before. Leave me alone, Gardner said. He pushed Bobbi's hand aside and touched that groove. There was music in his head, but it was muffled and quickly fading. He thought he could feel his teeth vibrating rapidly in their sockets, and suggested he would lose more of them tonight. Didn't matter, or suspected, Didn't matter. He wanted to touch it. He would touch it. Heck. Yeah, somebody whispered me no. I have no idea what that's about. Not a clue. Kind of funny, actually. This was the way in. This was the closest they had been to the Tommyknockers and their secrets. The first real sign that this ridiculous thing wasn't just solid through and through. The thought had occurred to him. What a cosmic joke that had been. Touching it was like touching a straight, solid. It was like touching starlight made solid. It's the hatch, Bobbi said. I knew it was here. Gardner grinned at her. We did it, Bobbi. Yeah, we did it. Thank God you came back, Gard. Bobbi hugged him, and when Gardner felt the jelly-like movement of her breast and torso, he felt sick revulsion rise in him. Starlight. Maybe the stars are touching him right now. It was a thought he was quick to conceal, and he thought that he did conceal it, that Bobbi got none of it. That's one for me, he thought. How big do you think it is? I'm not sure. I think we might be able to clear it today. It's best if we do. Time's gotten short, Gard. Well, how do you mean? The air over Haven has changed. This did it. Bobbi rapped her knuckles on the hull of the ship. There was a dim, bell-like note. I know. It makes people sick to come in. You saw the way Anne was. Yes. She was protected to some degree by her dental work. I know it sounds crazy, but it's true. Still, she left in a hell of a hurry. Oh, did she? If that was all the air-poisoning people who came into town, that would be bad enough. But we can't leave any more, Gard. Can't? No, I think you could. You might feel sickish for a few days, but you could leave. It would kill me, and very quickly. And something else. We've had a long siege of hot, still weather. The weather changes if the wind blows hard enough. It's going to blow our biosphere right over the Atlantic Ocean. We'll be like a bunch of tropical fish just after someone pulled the plug on the tank and killed the rebreather. We'll die. Bard shook his head. The weather changed the day you went to the woman's funeral, Bobbi. I remember. It was clear and breezy. That was what was so weird about you catching a sunstroke after all that hot and muggy. Things have changed. The becoming has sped up. Would they all die, Gardner wondered? All of them? Or just you and your special pals, Bobbi? The ones that have to wear makeup now. I hear doubt in your head, Gard, Bobbi said. She sounded half exasperated, half amused. What if I doubt that any of this can be happening at all? Gardner said. Fuck it, come on, dig, babe. 3. They took turns with a pick. One of them would use it for 15 minutes or so, and then both would clear away the rubble. By 3 that afternoon, Gard saw a circular groove that looked about 6 feet in diameter, like a manhole cover, and here, at least, was a symbol. He looked at it wonderingly, and at last he had to touch it. The blast of music in his head was louder this time, as if in weary protest, or in weary warning. A warning to get away from this thing before its protection lapsed entirely. And he needed to touch it, confirm it. Running his fingers over this almost Chinese symbol, he thought, a creature who lived under the glow of a different sun conceived this mark. What does it mean? A trespassing, we come in peace? Or is it maybe a plague symbol, an alien version of abandoned hope, all ye who enter in here?
A black and white striped sweater.
No.
Okay.
That might be down in the basement then. You're welcome. An alien version of abandoned hope, all ye who enter in here? Is your sister awake? Can you find out if Belle's awake, please? Okay. It was pressed into the metal of the ship like a bas relief. Merely touching it brought on a species of superstitious dread he had never felt before. He would have laughed it off 6 weeks ago. If 6 weeks ago someone had told him he might feel this way, like a caveman watching an eclipse of the sun, or a medieval peasant watching the arrival of what would eventually become known as Halley's Comet. A creature who lived under the glow of a different sun conceived this mark. I, James Eric Gardner, born in Portland, Maine, United States of America, Western Hemisphere of the world, am touching a symbol made and struck by God, only knows what sort of being, across a black distance. across a black distance of light years. My God, I am touching a different mind. Okay. He had, of course, been touching different minds for some time now, but this was not the same. Not the same at all. Are we really going in? He was aware that his nose was bleeding again, but not even that could make him take his hand away from the symbol. He trailed the pads of his fingers restlessly back and forth across the smooth, unknowable surface. More accurately, are you going to try to go in there? Are you, even though you know it probably will kill you? You get a jolt every time you touch the thing. What's going to happen if you're foolish enough to go inside? What?
I love audio. Ah, where I heard out loud, I can't like putting the effort in.
Oh, it goes through like the imagination goes through my mind as I'm reading. You taking off for a little bit? Okay. Be safe. It will probably set up a harmonic vibration in that damned steel plate of yours that will blow your mind apart like a stick of dynamite in a rotten turnip. Awfully concerned about your welfare of a man who was on the verge of suicide not very long ago, aren't you, good buddy? He thought, and had to grin in spite of himself. He drew his fingers away from the slope of the symbol, flicking them absently to get rid of the tingle, like a man trying to shake off a good-sized booger. Go on and go for it. What the fuck? You're gonna step out anyway. Having your brains vibrated to death inside of a flying saucer is a more exotic way to go than most. Guard laughed aloud. It was a strange sound at the bottom of that deep slit in the ground. What's funny? Bobby asked quietly. What's funny, Guard? Laughing Gardner said, everything. This is something else. I guess it's laugh or go crazy. You dig it? Bobby looked at him, obviously not digging it, and Gardner thought, of course she doesn't. Bobby got stuck with the other option. She can't laugh because she went crazy. Gardner roared until tears rolled down his cheeks, and some of these tears were bloody. But he did not notice it. Bobby did, but Bobby didn't bother to tell him. 4. It took them another 2 hours to completely clear the hatchway. When they were done, Bobby stuck out a dirty, makeup streaked hand in Gardner's direction. You alright? Ah. Ah. Gardner, or what? Gardner asked, shaking it. That's it, Bobby said. We're finished with the dig. We're done, Guard. Yeah? Yeah, tomorrow we'll go inside, Guard. Guard looked at her without saying anything. His mouth felt dry. Yes, Bobby said, and nodded, as if Guard had questioned this. Tomorrow we go in. Sometimes it seems like I started this about 1,000,000 years ago. Sometimes like it was just yesterday. I stumbled over it and saw it and ran my fingers along it and blew off the dirt. That was the start. One finger dragged through the dirt, and this is the end. That was a different Bobby at the beginning. That was a different Bobby at the beginning, Gardner said. Yes, Bobby said meditatively. She looked up, and there was a sunken gleam of humor in her eyes. A different Guard, too. Yeah, I guess you know. It'll probably kill me to go in there, but I'm going to give it a shot. It won't kill you, Bobbi said. No? No. Now let's get out of here. I've got a lot to do. I'll be out in the shed tonight. Gardner looked at Bobbi sharply, but Bobbi was looking upward as the motorized sling trundled down on its cables. I've been building things out there, Bobbi said. Her voice was dreamy. Me and a few others, getting ready for tomorrow. They'll be joining you tonight, Gardner said. It was not a question. Yes, but first I need to bring them out here to look at the hatch. They've been waiting for this day too, Gard. I bet they have, Gardner said. The sling arrived. Bobbi turned to look at Gardner narrowly. What's that supposed to mean, Gard? Nothing at all. Their eyes met, and Gardner could feel her clearly now, working at his mind, trying to dig into it. And he had again that sense of his secret knowledge, and secret doubts turning and turning like a dangerous jewel. He thought deliberately, Get out of my head, Bobbi. You're not welcome here. Bobbi recoiled as if slapped. But there was also faint shame on her face, as if Gard had caught her peeking where she had no business peeking. There was still some humanness left in her then. That was comforting. Bring them out by all means, Gard said. But when it comes to opening it up, Bobbi, it's just you and me. We dug the fucker up, and we go in the fucker first. You agree? Yes, Bobbi said. We go in first, the two of us. No brass bands, no parades, and no Dallas police. Bobbi smiled faintly. Not them either. She held out the sling. You want to ride up first? No, you go. It sounds like you got a schedule and a half still ahead of you. I do. Bobbi swung astride the sling, pressed a button, and started up. Thanks again, Gard. Welcome, Gardner said, cranking his neck to follow Bobbi's upward progress. And you'll feel better about all of this when you finish your own becoming. Bobbi rose up and out of sight. 4. The shed. 1. It was August 14th. A quick calculation told Gard that he had been with Bobbi for 41 days. Almost exactly a biblical period of confusion or unknown time, as in he wandered in the desert for 40 days and 40 nights. It seemed longer. It seemed like his entire life. He and Bobbi did no more than pick at the frozen pizza Gardner heated up for their supper. I think I'd like a beer, Bobbi said, going to the fridge. How about you? Want one, Gard? I'll pass, thanks. Bobbi raised her eyebrows, but said nothing. She got the beer, walked out on the porch, and Gardner heard the seat of her old rocket creak comfortably as she sat down. After a while, he drew a cold glass of water from the tap, went out, and sat beside Bobbi. They sat there for what seemed like a long time, not speaking, just looking out into the hazy stillness of early evening. Been a long time, Bobbi, you and me, he said. Yes, a long time. And a strange ending. Is that what it is? Gardner asked, turning in his chair to look at Bobbi. The end. Bobbi shrugged easily. Her eyes slid away from Gardner's. Well, end of a phase. How's that? Any better? If it's le mot juste, then it's not just better. Not even the best. Just the only mot that matters. Isn't that what I taught you? Bobbi laughed. Yeah, it was. First damn class. Mad dogs. Englishmen. And English teachers. Yeah. Bobbi sipped her beer and looked out into the old dairy road again, impatient for them to arrive, Gardner supposed. If the two of them had really said anything there was left to say after all these years, he almost wished he never heeded the impulse to come back at all, no matter what the reasons or eventual outcome. Such a weak ending to a relationship which had, in its time, encompassed love, sex, friendship, a period of tense detente concern, and even fear, seemed to make mock of the whole thing, the pain, the hurt, the effort. I always loved you, Gard, Bobbi said softly and thoughtfully, not looking at him. And no matter how this turns out, remember that I still do. Now she did look at Gardner. Her face was a strange parody of a face under the thick makeup. Surely this was some hopeless eccentric who happened to resemble Bobbi a little. And I hope you remember that I never asked to stumble over the goddamn thing. Free will was not a factor here, as some wise ass or other has surely said. We're going to pause there. All right. So we are. I had a phone call and then it ended up being absolutely nothing. Let's see. I'll read a few more minutes. I am going to pause though and mute while they head out and back and read some more. I always loved you, guard. Now we just read that. Oh, yes, free will was not a factor here, as some wise ass or other has surely said. But you chose to dig it up, Gardner said. His voice was as soft as Bobbi's, but he felt a new terror steal into his heart. Was that crack about free will a roundabout apology for his own impending murder? Stop it, guard. Stop jumping to shadows. Stop jumping at shadows. Is the car buried out at the end of Nister Road a shadow? His mind returned at once. Bobbi laughed softly. Man, the idea that whether or not to dig something like that up could ever be a function of free will. You might be able to stick to a kid in a high school debate, but we out on the poach, guard. You don't really think a person chooses something like that, do you? Do you think people can choose to put away any knowledge once they've seen the edge of it? I had been picketing nuclear power plants on that assumption. Yes, Garner said slowly. Bobbi waved it away. Societies may choose not to implement ideas. Actually, I doubt even that. But for the sake of argument, we'll say it's so. But ordinary people, no, guard, I'm sorry. When ordinary people see something sticking out of the ground, they gotta dig on it. They gotta dig on it because it might be treasure. And you don't have the slightest inkling that there would be, fallout was the word that came to mind. He didn't think it was the word Bobbi would like. Consequences. Bobbi smiled openly. Not a hint in the world. But Peter didn't like it. No, Peter didn't like it. But it didn't kill him, guard. I'm quite sure it didn't. Peter died of natural causes. He was old. That thing in the woods is a ship from another world, not Pandora's box. Not a divine apple tree. I heard no voice from heaven singing, "Oh, this ship shalt thou not eat, lest ye die." Cart smiled a little. But it is a ship of knowledge, isn't it? Yes, I suppose. Bobbi was looking toward the road again, obviously not wanting to pursue the topic further. When do you expect them? Gardner asked. Instead of answering, Bobbi nodded at the road. Kyle Arkenberg's caddy was coming, followed by Adley McKean's old Ford. Guess I'll go inside and catch some winks, Gardner said, getting up. If you want to go out to the ship with us, you're welcome to. With you, maybe. With them, cocked a thumb toward the approaching cars. They think I'm crazy. Also, they hate my guts because they can't read my mind. If I say you go, you go. Well, I think I'll pass, Gardner said, getting up and stretching. I don't like them either. They make me nervous. Oh, I'm sorry. Don't be. Just tomorrow, the two of us, Bobbi, right? Right. Give them my best. Remind them I helped. Steel plate in my head or not. I will. Of course I will. But Bobbi's eyes slid away again, and Gardner didn't like that. He didn't like it at all, too. He thought they might go out of the shed first, but they didn't. They stood around outside for a while talking. Bobbi, Frank, Newt, Dick Allison, Hazel, and the others. And they moved off toward the woods in a tight group. The light was shading down toward purple now, and most of them were carrying flashlights. Watching, Guard felt that his last real moment with Bobbi had come and gone. Oh? Oh, yeah. Where are you going to go? Cheats? Don't they still have free air? I'm not sure if they fixed it over at Flynn's. There was nothing now but to go into the shed and see what was in there. Make up his mind once and for all. Saw an eyeball peeping through a smoky cloud behind the green door. He got up and went through the house to the kitchen in time to see them heading into Bobbi's rampant garden. He counted noses quickly, making sure that they were all there, then headed for the cellar. Bobbi kept a spare key ring down there. He opened the cellar door and paused one final time. Do you really want to do this? No, he did not. But he meant to do it. Hey, babe, did you want to grab bread on your way home? Okay. Time you get out? 5? Well, this is going to be interesting. I think I'm going to go to the Ark with Nick. Have Daddy come get you. And then after Daddy gets you, he can come back and get me. You hear me? Tonight, I'm gonna have you drop me off at the Ark about 4:45. I'll have you go get Belle, and then you can come back and get me because Nick has that Christmas thing tonight. Okay? But I'll stay down there with him while you go out. That way he's not alone. Aw, shit. Belle, run up on my dresser. Right here. Right here. Right here. Come here. Give it here. Right here. I'd forgotten that I even had it up in my pocket. Because after I went and got the drink, to the moon with you, Alice. Isn't that what he says? To the moon with you, Alice? I don't know if any of you have ever seen The Honeymooners, but if you get a chance, you got to, because he goes, one of these days, Alice, to the moon with you. I forgot the car key upstairs. Hi, Babs. How are you? Oh, you know what? Give me 1 minute. Do you need food, don't you? Normally he does. Let's get your foods. Put her when I can see her eat. Okay. I is back. Sorry about that. All right. We're on part 2 of chapter 3. He opened the cellar door and paused one final time. Do you really want to do this? No. No, he did not, but he meant to do it. And he discovered that, more than fear, he felt a great sense of loneliness. There was literally no one else he could turn to for help. He had been in the desert with Bobbi Anderson 40 days and 40 nights. And now he was in the desert on his own. God help him. To hell with it, he thought. Like the old World War I platoon sergeant, was supposed to have said, come on, you guys. You want to live forever? Gardner went downstairs to get Bobbi's key ring. It was there, hanging on its nail, with every key neatly labeled. The only catch was the shed key was gone. It had been there. He was quite sure of that. When had he seen it there? Bard tried to remember and couldn't. Bobbi taking her precautions? Maybe. He stood in the new improved workshop, sweat on his forehead and sweat on his balls. No key. That was great. So what was he supposed to do? Grab Bobbi's axe and make like Jack Nicholson in The Shining? He could see it. Smash, crash, bash. Here's Gardner! Except it might be a bit hard to cover up before the pilgrims came back from the viewing of the sacred hatch. He stood in Bobbi's workshop, feeling time slip away. I must have hair in my nose. I can't feel it. Feeling old and unimproved. How long would they be out there anyway? No way of telling, was there? No way at all. Okay, where do people put keys? Always assuming she really was just taking precautions and not just hiding it from you. A thought struck him so hard he actually slapped his forehead. Bobbi hadn't taken the key, nor had anyone been trying to hide it. The key had disappeared when Bobbi had supposedly been in Derry Home Hospital recovering from sunstroke. He was almost positive of that. And what memory would not or could not supply, logic did. Bobbi hadn't been in Derry Home. She had been in the shed. Had one of the others taken the spare key to tend her when Bobbi needed tending? Did they all have copies? Why bother? No one in Haven was... Good Lord, let me see who this is real quick. People think I'm weird because I don't use credit cards. I just don't. I keep getting calls about unsecured debt. I don't have credit card debt. Leave me alone. Oy. Okay. Did they all have copies? Why bother? No one in Haven was into stealing these days. They were into becoming. The only reason the shed was kept locked was to keep him out. So they could just... Guard remembered watching them arrive on one of the occasions after that something had happened to Bobbi. The something had been a lot more serious than heat, frustration. He closed his eyes and saw the caddy, pile one. They got out and Archberg slipped off from the rest for a moment or two. You're up on one elbow, looking out the window at them. And if you think of it at all, you think he must have stepped around there to tap a kidney, but he didn't. He went around to get the key. Sure, that's what he did. He went around to get the key. It wasn't much, but it was enough to get him moving. He ran back up the cellar stairs, headed for the door, then doubled back. In the bathroom there was an ancient pair of Foster Grant sunglasses on top of the medicine cabinet. They had come to rest up there with a finality that trivial things managed to obtain only in a single man or woman's quarters, like the makeup which had belonged to Newt Barringer's wife. Gardner took the sunglasses down, blew a thick coating of dust from the lenses, wiped them carefully, then folded the bows and put them in his breast pocket. He went out to the shed. He stood by the padlocked plank door for a moment, looking out along the path which led to the dig. Dusk had advanced far enough now, so that the woods beyond the garden were a massy blue-gray with no detail in them. He saw no bobbing line of returning flashlights, but they could turn up at any time at all. They could turn up and catch you with your arm all the way down in the jam jar. I think they'll spend a pretty good while out there mooning over it. They've got the Klieg lights. You don't know for sure, but you don't know for sure. No, not for sure. Gardner shifted his gaze back to the plank door. Between the planks, he could see that green light, and he could hear a dim, unpleasant noise, like an old-fashioned washing machine with a gut full of clothes and thick suds. No, not just one washing machine, more like a whole line of them, not quite in sync. That light was pulsing in time to a low, slurping sound. I don't want to go in there. There was a smell. Even that, Gardner thought, was slightly sudsy, bland with a faint hint of rancidity, old soap, achy soap. But it's no bunch of washing machines. That sounds alive. It's not telepathic typewriters inside there. Now new and improved water, no, not new and improved water heaters. It's something alive. I don't want to go in there. Hi. I'm better. A lot better, actually. Yesterday I was really, really tired, so I missed reading completely, but today I'm better. I must have slept long enough. I also wasn't interrupted throughout the entire night, hardly being able to sleep, by a dog whining, for Lord knows whatever reason. So, I'm doing good today. How are you? We are going and talking about the shed. But he's going to, after all. Hadn't he come back from the dead hadn't he come back from the dead just to look inside Bobbi's shed and catch the Tommyknockers at their strange little benches? He supposed he had. Guard went around to the far side of the shed. There, hanging on a rusty nail under the eave, was the key. He reached up with a hand that trembled and took it down. He tried to swallow. At first he couldn't. His throat felt as if it had been coated with dry, heated flannel. A drink. Just one drink. I'll go in the house long enough to get just one. A short peg. Then I'll be ready. Fine. Sounded great, except he wasn't going to do it. And he knew he wasn't. The drinking part was done. So was the delaying part. holding the key tightly in his damp hand. Gardner went around to the door. Thought, don't want to go in. Don't even know if I can, because I'm so afraid. Stop it. Let that part be over too. Your Tommyknocker phase. He looked around again, almost hoping to see a line of flashlights coming out of the woods, or to hear their voices. But you wouldn't, because they talk in their heads. No flashlights, no movements, no crickets, no birdsong. The only sound was the sound of the washing machines. The sound of amplified, leaky heartbeats. Slish, slish, slish. Gardner looked at the pulsing green light fingering its way through the cracks between the boards. He reached into his pocket, took out the old sunglasses, and put them on. It had been a long time since he had prayed, but he prayed now. It was short, but a prayer for all that. God, please, Jim Gardner said. Into the dim summer dusk, slid the key into the padlock. 5. He expected a blast of head radio, but none came. Till it didn't, he hadn't realized that his stomach was tight and sucked in, like a man expecting an electric shock. He licked his lips and turned the key. A small noise, barely audible over the low, slooching sounds from the shed. Click. The hasp sprang up a little from the body of the lock. He reached for it with an arm that felt like lead. He pulled it free, clicked the hasp down, and put it into his left front pocket with the key still sticking out. He felt like a man in a dream. It was not a good one to be having. The air in there had to be okay. Well, perhaps not okay. Perhaps none of the air in Haven was exactly okay anymore. But it was about the same as the air outside, Guard thought. Because the shed was a sieve of cracks. If there was such a thing as a pure Tommyknocker biosphere, this couldn't be it. At least, he didn't think so. All the same, he would take his first risks, as few risks as possible. He took a deep breath, held it, told himself to count his steps. 3. You go in no more than 3 steps, just in case. One good look around, and then out. In one big hurry. You hope. Yes, I hope. He took a final long look along the path, saw nothing, turned back to the shed, and opened the door. The green glow, brilliant even through the sunglasses, washed over him like corrupt sunlight. 6. At first he could see nothing at all. The light was too bright. He knew it had been brighter than this on other occasions, but he had never been so close to it before. Close. God, he was in it. Someone standing just outside the open door looking for him now, would hardly be able to see him. He slitted his eyes against the brilliant greenness, and shuffled forward a step, then another step, then a third. His hands were held out in front of him, like those of a groping blind man, which he was. Shit, he even had the dark sunglasses to prove it. The noise was louder. Slish, 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 off to the left. He turned in that direction, but didn't go any further. He was afraid to go any further. Afraid of what he might touch. Now his eyes began to adjust. He saw dark shapes in the green. A bench, but no Tommyknockers at it. It had simply been shoved back against the wall, out of the way, and my God, it is a washing machine. It really is. It was all right. One of the old-fashioned kind with wringer roller at the top. But it wasn't making that weird noise. It had also been pushed back against the wall. It was in the process of being modified somehow. Someone was working on it in the best Tommyknocker tradition, but it wasn't running now. Next to it was an Electrolux vacuum cleaner. One of the old long ones that ran on wheels, low to the ground, like a mechanical Datsun. A chainsaw mounted on wheels. Stacks of smoke detectors from Radio Shack, most still in their boxes. A number of kerosene drums, also on wheels, with hoses attached to them and things like arms. Arms, of course they are. They're robots. Fucking robots in the making. And none of them looks exactly like the white dove of peace, does it, guard? And slish, 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 further left. The source of the glow was here. Guard heard a funny, hurt noise escape him. The breath he had been holding ran weakly out like air from a pricked balloon. The strength ran out of his legs in exactly the same way. He reached out blindly. His hand felt the bench, and he did not sit, but simply plopped down on it. He was unable to take his eyes from the left rear corner of the shed, where Ev Hillman, Ann Anderson, and Bobby's good old Beagle Peter had somehow been hung up on posts in two old galvanized steel shower cabinets, with their doors removed. They hung there like slabs of beef on meat hooks. But they were alive, Guard saw. Somehow, someway, still alive. A thick black cord, which looked like a high voltage line or a very big coaxial cable, ran out of the center of Ann Anderson's forehead. A similar cable ran out of the old man's right eye, and the entire top of the dog's skull had been peeled away. Dozens of similar cords ran out of Peter's exposed and pulsing brain. Peter's eyes, free of cataracts, turned toward Guard. He whined, Jesus, oh my Jesus Christ. He tried to get from the bench. He couldn't. Get up from the bench. He couldn't. Portions of the old man's skull and Ann's skull had also been removed, he saw. The doors had been torn off, the shower stalls, but they were still full of some clear liquid. It was being contained in some way. That tiny sun was contained in Bobby's water heater, he supposed. If he tried to get into one of those stalls, he would feel a tough springiness, plenty of give, but no access. Want to go in. I only want to get out. Then his mind returned to the former scripture. Jesus, dear Jesus, oh my Jesus, look at them. I don't want to look at them. No, but he couldn't tear his eyes away. The liquid was green and was clear and emerald green. It was moving, making that low, thick, sudsy sound. For all its clarity, Gardner thought that liquid must be very gluey indeed, perhaps the consistency of dish detergent. How can they breathe in there? How can they be alive? Maybe they're not. Maybe it's only the movement of the liquid that makes you think they are. Maybe it's just an illusion. Please, Jesus, let it be an illusion. Peter, you heard him whine. Nope, part of the illusion, that's all. He's hanging on a hook in a shower stall filled with the interstellar equivalent of Joy dish detergent. He couldn't whine in that. It would come out all soap bubbles, and you're just freaking out. That's what it is. Just a little visit from King Freakout. Except he wasn't freaking, and he knew it, as he knew he hadn't heard Peter whine with his ears. That hurt, helpless whining sound that came from the same place that radio music came from, the center of his brain. Ann Anderson opened her eyes. Get me out of here, she screamed. Get me out of here. I'll leave her alone, only I can't feel anything except when they make it hurt. Make it hurt more. Make it hurt. Gardner tried again to get up. He was very faintly aware that he was making a sound. Why is my kiddo calling? Give me a minute. I gotta go BRB again. Oh, my poor kiddo. She hit a deer in October and they're still repairing her car. Poor thing. So I will take care of that when I'm done reading today. Now, let's see. Where are we at? Oh, yes. Anne. Guard tried again to get up. He was very faintly aware that he was making a sound. Just some old sound. The sound he was making was probably a lot like the sound of a woodchuck run over in the road might make, he thought. The greenish, moving liquid gave Sissy's face a gassy, ghastly corpse hue. The blue of her eyes had bleached out. Her tongue floated like some fleshy undersea plant. Her fingers, wrinkled and pruny, drifted. I can't feel anything except for when they make it hurt, Anne wailed. And he couldn't shut her voice out. Couldn't stick his fingers in his ears to make it go away. Because that voice was coming from inside his head. Flish, flish, flish. Copper tubing running into the tops of the shower stalls, making them look like a hilarious combination of Buck Rogers' suspended animation chambers and Lil Abner moonshine stills. Peter's fur had fallen out in patches. His hindquarters appeared to be collapsing in on themselves. His legs moved through the liquid in long, lazy sweeps, as if in his dreams he was running away. When they make it hurt, the old man opened his one eye. The boy. This thought was utterly clear, unquestionable. Gardner found himself responding to it. What boy? The answer was immediate, startling for a moment, then unquestionable. David. David Brown. That one eye stared at him, a ceaseless sapphire with emerald tints. Save the boy. The boy, David Brown. Was he a part of this somehow? The boy they had hunted for so many exhausting hot days? Of course he was. Maybe not directly, but a part of it. Where is he? Gardner thought, at the old man who floated in his pale green solution. Slish, slish, slish. Altair 4! The old man returned finally. David's on Altair 4. Save him and then kill us. It's bad. Real bad. Can't die. I've tried. We all have. Even... Bitch. Her. This is being in hell. Use the transformer to save David. Then pull the plugs. Cut the wires. Burn the place. Do you hear? For the third time, Gardner tried to get up and fell bonelessly back onto the bench. He became aware that thick electrical cords were scattered all over the floor, and that brought back a ghastly memory of the band that had picked him up on the turnpike when he was coming back from New Hampshire. He puzzled at this, and then got the connection. The floor looked like a concert stage just before a rock group started to play. That or a big city TV studio. The cable snaked into the huge crate filled with circuit boards and a stack of VCRs. They were wired together. He looked for the DC current converter, saw none, and then thought, of course not, idiot. Batteries are DC. The cassette recorders had been plugged into a mix of home computers, Atari's, Apple IIs, 3s, TRS 80s, Commodores, blinking on and off. On one lit screen was the word program. Behind the modified computers were more circuit boards, hundreds of them. The whole thing was uttering a low, sleepy hum, the sound he associated with, use the transformer, big electrical equipment. Light spilled out of the crate, and the computers placed haphazardly next to it in a green flood. But the light was not quite steady. It was cycling. The pulse of the light and its relation to the sudsing sounds coming from the shower cabinets was very clear. That's the center, he thought, with an invalid's weak excitement. That's the annex to the ship. They come in the shed to use that. It's a transformer, and they draw their power from there. Use the transformer to save David. Might as well ask to fly Air Force One. Ask me something easy, Pop. If I could bring him back from wherever he was by reciting Mark Twain, Poe even, I'd take a shot. That thing? It looks like an explosion in an electronics warehouse. But the boy, how old, 4, 5? And where in God's name had they put him? The sky was literally the limit. Save the boy, use the transformer. There was, of course, not even any time to look closely at the damn mess. The others would be coming back. Still, he stared at the one lighted video terminal with hypnotic intensity. Program? What if I typed Altair 4 on the keyboard, he wondered, and saw there was no keyboard? At the same second, the letters on the screen changed. Altair 4. It now read. No, his mind screamed, full of intruder's guilt. No, Jesus, no! The letters rippled. No, Jesus, no. Sweating, Gardner thought, cancel, 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 cancel on the screen. The letters blinked on and off, on and off. Gardner stared at them, horrified. Then, program? He made an effort to shield his thoughts and tried again to get to his feet. This time he made it. Other wires came out of the transformer. These were thinner. There were, he counted, yes, 8 of them, ending in earplugs. Earplugs, Freeman Moss, animal trainer, leading mechanical elephants. Here were more earplugs. In a crazy way, it reminded him of a high school language lab. Are they learning another language in here? Yes, no, they're learning to become. The machine is teaching them. Where are the batteries? I don't see any. There should be 10 or 12 big old Delcos hooked up to that thing. Just a maintenance charge running through it. There should be. Stunned, he raised his eyes to the shower stalls again. He looked at the coaxial cable coming out of the woman's forehead to the old man's eye. He watched Peter's legs move in those big, dreamy strides and wondered just how Bobbi had gotten the dog's hairs on her dress. Had she been giving Peter the equivalent of an interstellar oil change? Had she been perhaps overcome by a simple human emotion, love, remorse, guilt? Had she perhaps hugged her dog before filling that cabinet up with liquid again? There are batteries, organic Delcos, and Everetties, you might say. They're sucking them dry, sucking them like vampires. A new emotion crept through his fear, bewilderment, and revulsion. It was fury, and Gardner welcomed it. They make it hurt, make it hurt, make it hurt! Her voice cut off abruptly. The dull hum of the transformer changed pitch, cycled down even lower. The light coming out of the crate faded a little. He thought she had fallen unconscious, thereby lowering the machine's total output by X number of, volts? Dins? Ohms? Who the fuck knew? End it, son. Save my grandson, and then end it. For a moment, the old man's voice filled his head. Perfectly clear and perfectly lucid. Then it was gone. The old man's eyes slipped close. The green light from the machine grew paler yet. They woke up when I came in, he thought feverishly. The anger still pounded and drilled in his mind. He spat out a tooth almost without realizing he had done so. Even Peter woke up a little. Now they've gone back to whatever state they were in before. Sleeping? No, not sleeping. Something else. Organic cold storage. Batteries dream of electric sheep, he thought, and uttered a cracked cackle. He moved backward away from the transformer. What exactly is this transforming? How? Why? Away from the shower stalls, the cables. His eyes turned toward the array of gadgets ranged against the far wall. The ringer washer had something mounted on top of it, something that looked like a boomerang TV antennas, like the boomerang TV antennas you sometimes saw on the backs of big limos. Behind the washer and to its left was an old-fashioned treadle sewing machine with a glass funnel mounted on its side wheel. Kerosene drums with hoses and steel arms. A butcher knife he saw had been welded to the end of one of those arms. Christ, what is all this? What is it for? A voice whispered. Maybe it's protection guard, in case the Dallas police show up early. It's the Tommyknockers yard sale army. Old washing machine with cellular antennas. Electrolux vacuums, chainsaws on wheels. Name it and claim it, baby. He felt his sanity tottering. His eyes were drawn relentlessly back to Peter. Peter with most of his skull peeled away. Peter with a bunch of wires plugged into what remained of his head. His brain looked like a pallid veal roast with a bunch of temperature probes stuck into it. Peter with his legs racing dreamily through that liquid, as if running away. Bobbi, he thought in despair and fury, how could you do that to Peter? Christ! The people were bad, awful, but Peter was somehow worse. It was a curse piled on top of an obscenity. Peter, his legs lopping and lopping as if running away in his dream. Yeah, we'll be alright. Batteries. Living batteries. He backed into something. There was a dull metallic thump. He turned around and saw another shower cabinet. Little blossoms of rust on its sides, its front door gone. Holes had been punched in the back. Wires had been threaded through these. They now hung limply down. Large bore steel plugs at their tips. For you, guard, his brain yammered. This plug's for you. Like the beer commercials say. They'll open up the back of your skull. Maybe short out your motor control centers first, so you can't move. Then they'll drill. Drill for the place where they get their power. This plug's for you. For all you do. All ready and waiting. Wow. Neato Kino. He snatched for his thoughts, which were tightening into a hysterical spiral, and brought them under control. Not for him, at least not originally. This had already been used. There was that faint smell, bland and sudsy, streaks of dried gunk in the inner walls, the last traces of that thick green liquid. It looks like the Wizard of Oz's semen, he thought. Second. Alright, guys. Unfortunately, I'm going to finish up a little bit here, and then I got to be done because I got to go to the store. My husband is asking for me to go. That and the fact that we got to fill the tires. It looked like the Wizard of Oz's semen, he thought. Do you mean Bobbi's got her sister floating in a big sperm bank? The weird cackle escaped him again. He pressed the heel of his hand against his mouth, pressed hard to stifle it. He looked down and saw a pair of tan shoes tossed beside the shower cabinet. He picked one up, saw splashes of dried blood on it. Bobbi. Her one pair of good shoes. Her going-out shoes. She was wearing them when she left the funeral that day. The other shoe was also bloody. Guard looked behind the shower cabinet and saw the rest of the clothing Bobbi had been wearing that day. The blood. All that blood. He didn't want to touch the blouse, but the shape under it was clear. He pinched a small piece of it as he could get between his fingers and peeled it up from Bobbi's good charcoal-colored shirt. Underneath the shirt, the gun. It was the biggest, oldest-looking gun Gardner had ever seen except for pictures in a book. After a moment, he picked the gun up, rolled the cylinder, and there was still 4 rounds in it. 2 gone. Gardner was willing to bet that one of those rounds had gone into Bobbi. He pushed the cylinder back into place, stuck it in his belt. At once a voice spoke up in his mind. Shot your wife. Good fucking deal. Never mind, the gun might come in handy. When they see it's gone, it's you they'll come looking for, Guard. I thought you already came to that conclusion. No, that was one thing he didn't think he had to worry about. They would have noticed the changed words on the computer screen. But these clothes hadn't been touched since Bobbi took them off. Or since they took them off her, which was probably more likely. They must be too exalted when they get in here to bother much about housekeeping, he thought. Damn good thing there's no flies. He touched the gun again. This time, the voice in his head was silent. It had decided, perhaps, that there were no wives here to worry about. You have to shoot Bobbi. Will you be able to? That was a question he couldn't answer. Slish, slish, slish. How long had Bobbi and her company been gone? He didn't know. Hadn't the slightest idea. Time had no meaning in here. The old man was right. This was hell. And did Peter still respond to his strange master's caress when she came in here? His stomach was on the edge of revolt. He had to get out. Get out right now. He felt like a creature in a fairy tale. Bluebeard's wife in a secret room. Jack grumbling in the giant's pile of gold. Grubbing in the giant's pile of gold. He felt ripe for discovery. But he held the stiff, bloody garment in front of him as if frozen. Not as if he was frozen. Where's Bobbi? She had a sunstroke. Hell of a strange sunstroke that had soaked her blouse with blood. Gardner had retained a morbid, sickish interest in guns and the damage they could do to the human body. If she had been shot with a big old gun now in his own belt, he guessed Bobbi had no right to be alive. Even if she had been taken quickly to the hospital, which specialized in the emergency treatment of gunshot wounds, she probably would have been dead. Or would have died. They brought her in here when I was blown apart, but the Tommyknockers fixed me up right smart. Not for him. The old shower stall was not for him. Gardner had a feeling that he would be put out of the way with more finality. The shower stall had been for Bobbi. They had brought her in here and what? Why, hooked her up to batteries, of course. Not Anne. She would not been here then, but to Peter and Hillman. He dropped the blouse and forced himself to pick it up again and put it back on top of the skirt. He didn't know how much of the real world they noticed when they got in here. Not much, he guessed. But he didn't want to take any extra chances. He looked at the holes in the back of the cabinet, the dangling cords with the steel plugs at their tips. The green light had begun to pulse brighter and more rapidly again. He turned around. Anne's eyes were open again. Her short hair floated around her head. He could still see that unending hate in her eyes, now mixed with horror and growing strangeness. Now there were bubbles. They floated up from her mouth in a brief, thick stream. Thought sound exploded in his head. She was screaming. Gardner fled. And we're going to stop there, and we'll start section 7 tonight. All right? So, I will see you all soon. Don't forget to follow if you can, if you haven't already. And I will talk to y'all soon. I love y'all. Bye.